नेमीचंद्र जैन का जन्मदिन है और उनके परिवार के लोगों ने मिलकर कुछ राशि एकत्र कर एक नेमी निधि स्थापित की ताकि उनकी स्मृति में हर वर्ष कुछ आयोजन हो। सबसे पहला आयोजन था एक व्याख्यान जो परंपरा और आधुनिकता पर संगीतविद और चिंतक डॉक्टर मुकुंद लाठ ने दिया था। दूसरा व्याख्यान भाषा की संजीवनी पर डॉक्टर कृष्ण कुमार ने दिया था, जो शिक्षाविद और बुद्धिजीवी हैं। और आज बजाय व्याख्यान के हमने दो रंगकर्मियों को पकड़ा है। यहाँ पकड़ा शब्द का मुहावरेदार प्रयोग हो रहा है कि वो आपस में बातचीत करें और जो कुछ हो सकता है वो करें। इसके पहले कि वो रंग संवाद श्री महेश एलकुंचवार और माया राव के बीच शुरू हो, इस अवसर पर राष्ट्रीय नाट्य विद्यालय ने नेमी जी के अंग्रेजी में लिखी गई कुछ टिप्पणियों का एक संचयन प्रकाशित किया है। नेमी जी अंग्रेजी में भी लिखते थे और स्टेट्समैन में उनका एक पाक्षिक स्तंभ आता था, फ्रॉम द विंग्स। This book is a selection done by Kirti, these writings which appeared in From the Wings. आप जानते हैं कि नेमी जी बुनियादी तौर पर तो कवि थे, यानी शुरुआत तो उन्होंने कवि की तरह की, तो एक तरह से कविता उनका एकांत थी। फिर वो आलोचना, साहित्य आलोचना में गए और उसके बाद रंग आलोचना की तरफ आए, जो उनकी सार्वजनिकता का पक्ष था। तो एक तरह से ऐसा कहा जाता है, और शायद उचित ही कहा जाता है, कि वो जिंदगी भर उपन्यासों में भी और नाटक में भी काव्य तत्व की खोज करते रहे और उस पर बल देते रहे। उनका आग्रह इस पर था कि अंततः अच्छा नाटक वही है जो कविता जैसी सघनता, उत्कटता और तात्कालिकता अर्जित कर लेता है। नेमी जी उन थोड़े से रंग कर्मियों में से थे उत्तर भारत में जिनका समग्र भारतीय रंगमंच से सरोकार था। तो इस पुस्तक में भी उसकी झलक है, क्योंकि जो कुछ अन्य भाषाओं में भी, एक तो खैर बहुभाषी थे, वो कई भाषाएं स्वयं जानते थे, हिंदी अंग्रेजी के अलावा उर्दू और बंगला और मराठी, और उन्होंने कारण के साथ मिलकर कन्नड़ से भी अनुवाद किया था। लेकिन बहुभाषाविद होने के अलावा वो जो उस समय की रंग सक्रियता थी, उसके एक बहुत सजग और अखिल भारतीय साक्षी थे। इसका प्रमाण इस पुस्तक में भी एक बार फिर मिलेगा। इसके पहले के पुस्तक के लोकार्पण के लिए मैं श्रीमती कृष्णा सोबती अस्वस्थ होने के कारण नहीं आ सकी हैं, और जब मैंने कहा था हमने पकड़ रखा है, तो अब इसकी अंतर्ध्वनि ये थी कि चूंकि दो लोग हाथ में थे तो उनमें से किसी एक से तो लोकार्पण कराया ही जा सकता है। इसके पहले के लोकार्पण हो, मैं अनुराधा कपूर से, जो कि राष्ट्रीय नाट्य विद्यालय की निदेशक हैं, अनुरोध करता हूँ कि वो आएँ, दो शब्द इस पुस्तक के बारे में कहें। Of course, you're free to speak in English, and in any case, the book is in English.
Thank you for the freedom, Ashok ji. Respected Rekha ji and friends, I'm very grateful for this opportunity today to speak about a set of writings that we have been familiar with and which we cherish a great deal, because Nemi ji in many senses was a mentor to many of us here because of his many-faceted personality. As Ashok ji has already said, editor, poet, critic, independent thinker, person connected with radical theatre and IPTA, and such a multifaceted personality in some senses has always been a source of inspiration. So the release of the book with some support from the National School of Drama is a very, very privileged moment. The book in itself is a bit like the person who's written it, very, very many faceted, looking at many areas, from censorship to infrastructural aspects of theatre, theatre training, teaching, dramaturgy, modernism, issues of authenticity. So in some senses it is a very, very clear and very fine lens on the 70s and 80s, which is a time that was very dynamic and actually produced many of the issues that we are still debating with today. So Nemiji's perspicacity and his views on those issues which actually still sometimes vex us, sometimes lead to hot discussion, is a very, very cherished and valuable view. And I think that for many of us, the opportunity to have these reviews in the covers of a book is particularly valuable, because it is not just about theatre in Delhi, but it has reverberations and implications for theatre at that time across India and even today, because I do think it is about issues that concern us. So it is a lens on the theatre of the 70s and 80s, and a lens on current performance and on current ideas of performance. So it gives me great pleasure, and I'm very, very, very privileged to be here to say that such a book is now with us, and I'm sure will be read widely and appreciated widely. Thank you very much.
आज जो दो रंगकर्मी आपस में बातचीत करने जा रहे हैं और जिसको सुनने का आपको अवसर मिलने जा रहा है, उनमें से पहले हैं महेश कुंजवार, जो इस समय भारत के मूर्धन्य नाटककारों में हैं और जो मराठी में लिखते हैं। महेश कुंजवार की रचनाओं की ज़्यादातर भारतीय भाषाओं में तो प्रस्तुति हुई है। मैं देखता हूँ कि फ्रेंच और जर्मन तक में, यद्यपि ये विशेष प्रसन्नता की बात है कि नहीं, मैं नहीं जानता, लेकिन इन भाषाओं में भी उनके नाटक खेले गए हैं, अनुवाद हुआ है। हाँ, यहाँ भी यही लिखा था, मैं सोचा खेला भी गया होगा शायद। नाटकों का क्या भरोसा है, लिखे जाते हैं, खेले जाते हैं, किसका रोना होता रहता है कि ऐसे नाटक नहीं है जो खेले जाएं। यद्यपि महेश कुंजवार के बारे में तो ये नहीं कहा जा सकता, क्योंकि बहुत जीवन मराठी की परंपरा से आते हैं और उन्होंने बहुत सारे नए प्रयोग और नए किस्म के नाटक लिखे हैं। उनकी नाट्य संपदा जो है वो बहुत बहुल और विविध है, जिसका कुछ परिचय आपको बातचीत से भी मिलेगा। माया राव नृत्य, रंगमंच, सिनेमा, संगीत आदि अनेक क्षेत्रों में सक्रिय रही हैं और उनमें से अनेक का कुछ घालमेल भी करती रही हैं। यहाँ घालमेल शब्द प्रशंसा परक है, ये ध्यान दें। और उन्होंने कथकली में बाकायदा शिक्षा प्राप्त की है। उसके बाद इतनी सारी भूमिकाएं की हैं, जिसमें रामायण, महाभारत और ओथेलो से लेकर कृष्ण और कर्ण और अर्जुन और डेस्टिमोना और शूर्पणखा और द्रौपदी इत्यादि इत्यादि। तो उनकी अभिनय की, सिर्फ अभिनय ही नहीं किया है, उन्होंने नाटक लिखे हैं, उन्होंने तरह तरह के नाटक रचे हैं, प्रस्तुतियों की रचना की है। दोनों एक दूसरे से काफ़ी अलग लोग हैं, और इसीलिए बातचीत में कुछ मज़ा भी आ सकता है। अगर थोड़ा बहुत एक दूसरे से परिचित होते, थोड़ा रूल रियायत करते, कुछ लिहाज करते, कुछ जानी हुई पहचानी बातों को दोहराते, ऐसे दोहराव की संभवतः इसमें संभावना नहीं है। तो इसके पहले कि वो आपके सामने आकर बातचीत करें, हम उनकी प्रस्तुतियों के कुछ छोटे छोटे अंश आपको इस पर्दे पर दिखाएंगे। पहले अर्जुन जवार के नाटकों से और फिर माया राव के, और उसके बाद फिर वो अपना स्थान ग्रहण करके बातचीत करेंगे।
चंदू, रवि और मैं, लेकिन ये सब मैं सुधीर को नहीं बताने वाला।
ये ठीक नहीं, इस तरह किसी की हाल होना अच्छी बात नहीं।
सब अच्छा है, आखिर यही काम आने वाला है। तुम्हारा लाडला देवर नहीं काम आने का। देख लिया ना, टीवी खरीद सकते हैं, हक मांग सकते हैं, जिम्मेदारी नहीं उठाने को।
नहीं, कैसे बातें करते हैं आप? घर में गमी चल रही है और आप?
अरे वाह भाई वाह, बड़ी गमी मना रही है हमारी बीवी अपने पति का। देख लो तो इन दोनों में कैसी लगती है तुम्हें।
मुझसे नहीं होगा ये।
देखो देख मत करो, पता नहीं बंटवारे के बाद इसको क्या कुछ देखने तो दो, शादी में कैसी दिखती है। मोहन माला 15 तोले, चपला हार 15 तोले, सुतलों का हार 3 तोले, नथ गुलाब का फूल वज्रसी, अंगूठियां, अंगूठी।
अहो, ऐसा लगता है ये सिर्फ गहने और सोना नहीं, और भी कुछ है। देशपांडे घराने की सारी औरतें मेरे आसपास खड़ी होकर मुझे दुला रही हैं। दादी जी की सास, खुद दादी जी, आई, ये सभी बड़े प्यार से मुझे छू रही है। इन सभी ने ये गहने पहने होंगे, जतन किए होंगे। इन सभी के हाथ, बदन इन गहनों ने छुए होंगे। कल मेरे तलाक की बीवी भी इसे पहनेगी। क्या वो भी यही महसूस करेगी? शादी के बाद जब मैं पहले पहले इस घर में आई तो इन गहनों को पहनकर आई कितनी तेजस्वी लग रही थी। मुझे समझा रही थी एक एक गहने का इतिहास, किसने बनाया, कब बनवाया।
है तो सारे आप ही के बच्चे, किसी को तड़पाइए उसकी इच्छा अधूरी रह गई। तुम मुझसे बताइए, मुझसे बन पाता है उतना तो कर रही हूँ। अब आपका मन यह न सकते बेखट कैसे धारिए।
You asked me something a minute ago. उसने कुछ अरे shut your mouth. Soon be. You asked me if I was happy. So the answer is yes. See how happy we are. Let's soon share this. Soon. Don't walk. Just don't walk. Don't see. Nana लगती है. चूमन कर जा बना. I was looking for opportunities and get up. Lord, so Lord. Like the good old days in college. You two used to laugh like donkey brains. You men. Sure. Especially during the lecture. He had such a beautiful profile. Oh, now look at handsome, devastating profile. He was the best writer. Who knows? Didn't he have a nice profile, Oru? Arey, who was looking at his profile, yeah? He had such eyes. And the eyes! हमारी नजर तो बहुत ही गड़ी है. Oh, sorry, won't talk like that. नहीं आया साला पंगे में. शराय रोटी को यूं शुभदा. तेरे सामने हम कौन से खेत की गाजर मूली? No tomato. All right. Now silence.
in? Can I sit with you just for a while? We could just sit and lie side by side, watch the sky, birds are flying. Just let me in. Now what's that road? What's that road that leads to you? Will I ever know? Will I get there? Please let me in, just let me lie, let me sit standing up, let me free. I'll close your eyes and you open my eyes. Down that road, you know that bend in the river, that road we go down together. Tell me your name. Can I write your name? Will they read it in the papers tomorrow? Will they? No, take, here it is. I've saved it for you. Nothing's lost. I've picked it out. Hold on tight. Here it is. Just hold my hand. Don't let me go, please. I'll wipe that sweat off your face, that blood off your face, and no, I won't let it. I won't let it come. Here, see, there's nowhere. Where's that road?
मन मैंने क्या ही कब है ये तो हर पॉइंट पे जा सकता है तो हमारे इस वाले एपिसोड पे ये यहाँ जाता है तो क्या होता है मेरा अनलॉक यू सरदारजी तो मेरी तरफ ही देख रहे हैं you unlock me and now होता क्या है कि जी you have been left with the two pieces. So as you are now, the stress is rising. मेरा तो बढ़ता ही जा रहा है मैंने आज फेशियल योगा तो किया ही नहीं तो when you are left with the two pieces, what you have to do is on the Meheroli Gurgama road as you are cruising along, इनको जो ऐसे कि alternating में बारी से ऐसे ले लेके this is a very good for the stress and as the stress level of the stress is rising इनको ले लेके one by one gents can be using the boxer shorts in the back seat of the car इनको ऐसे ले लेके that is the time that you have to reflect on the various features of your new Duncan make Tuscan. So when you are like this reflecting, no, that is when the special features she is a beauty. क्या है इनको मैं यहाँ रखती हूँ कि number one special feature. The engine displacement, not engine, it's a multi-valve engine. So that there is one intake of the fuel air, वो जो है mixture, one intake and there is an exhaust because it is a multi-valve engine. तो होता क्या है? It is best that for one intake and one exhaust. So for best results आपको क्या करना है कि in your dashboard keep 2-3 mullies along with the patta. And the mullies जो है ना actually freshly plucked from our Gurgama fields. Of course I know कि the Gurgama fields little bit तो वो scarce हो गए because now our tall standing buildings are there. हमारे contractor साहब हैं हाँ anyway whatever it is कोशिश तो कर लो कि मूली भी हो पत्ते भी हो because one is antidote of the other. So that is for the perfect multi-valve air exhaust mixture के लिए. Okay, feature 1 हो गया कि नहीं? Feature number 2.
ये टेक्निकल टर्म्स में डिटेल्स होते नहीं है. तो नंबर 2 क्या है? Is out the engine displacement. The engine displacement has been done in such a way that you can wear the natural fibers corset longitudinally for maximum piston clearance. That is the number 1, number 2 special feature of bargaining. And for the men folk of our audience here, I'm glad that the studio audience has been made in a way to very crazy. So what it is that you have to, for the DRV done, have the mummy ready. What is mummy? Mummy is the morning after men's only eye cream. वो लगा रहता है जी आपके secret वाले drop in the back seat, only to be applied on Monday mornings. Any other day क्या होता है? There may be a slight itching sensation. उसको आप avoid करें. So है ना, वो भी हो गया और special feature. अब हम क्या? Oh yes, अगला वाला क्या है कि it has the special feature of the.
You had some glimpse of what these two have been all about. Of course, very briefly. And now may I request Mahesh Elkinchwar and Maya Rao to come onto the stage. Ilmi ji.
थिएटर में गिरने की इतनी आदत हमें है कि हमारे लिए कुछ नई बात नहीं.
I read somewhere that the inspiration for Vada Chirabandi came from, possibly one of the inspirations that a friend of yours told you that he knew an old feudal family that had a tractor. Yeah. And the family sank, and so did the tractor into the field outside the home. And that it's a wonderful image, and that's what got you going. We can be heard, I suppose. Or should we pick this up? इसको क्या हाथ में रखें?
It was Satyadev Dubey who told me the story of a feudal family buying a tractor and couldn't use it, so it got buried in the foreground gradually. And it immediately hit the core because Dubey and I have the same kind of background, similar background. Dubey comes from Bilaspur, I come from a very small village in Vidarbha, feudal families. So the image stuck with me, and I said I will begin with this image. The first 3 pages are about this, I think, about this tractor, and then the play naturally grew out of it, I guess. I don't know how it happens with you, but with me, I mean, most of the time I don't know what I'm going to write about, but there is some image, some oral image or visual image that hits me, and I begin with that, and a play takes shape. It's rather uncanny. When I try to find out how it all began, it's very difficult, because I think the preparation is going on inside all the life, and all there are fragments in there. They come together at one point, and it's just an accident that you see an image and it hits you and you get it right. It's happening with you.
Yeah, it comes from different quarters, I think. As you saw in the 2 clips, for me, object plays a very big role. And now that I've started using a camera does this. For me, camera becomes another actor, because it does this job of magnifying something very big, making it larger than life. And so, for instance, in the first clip, Heads Are Meant for Walking Into, those they were toys that my child used to play with, these building blocks. And somehow they have been with me ever since I've seen my sister play with them. The way you can put one on top of the other and how quickly they crumble. And then when I suddenly saw them projected huge, and one day I happened to see my foot next to these building blocks, and I just lifted my foot, and it was like a huge image, what we see in maybe in Encyclopedia Britannica or something of how, or not encyclopedia, but of a civilization getting crushed, and just the foot and the blocks together. So any combination of objects, for me, that comedy episode came from, we've all seen so many pictures of these two cucumber pieces that people put on their eyes, they put here and they put all over the place. And somehow those two rings of those the cooling effect of the cucumber has stayed with me for a long time. So I think, object, sometimes just a word. I once made a show that started, we were 4 or 5 of us, and we started with the word departures. And the word departures, as we know in English, has so many different resonances. It's going from one place to the other, but it's also we make departures of the mind. You suddenly 5 years later, when you're face to face with a same issue, you suddenly realized, oh, my feeling about that has changed now. I don't feel the same about it anymore. You don't know where you changed along the line, but you have changed. So we made a program that just started from being excited by the word departures. So yeah, from different places.
I think you almost identical process, but do you ever choose a topic or a theme of something from contemporary reality and construct the play around it or on it? Do you ever do that?
I think it used to happen more in the past that I would choose a story, something that moved me, and say, okay, let's see what happens when
Whole Day, I think.
Holdo was like that. The Job was like that, Brecht's The Job. But ever since after that, I think the excitement really has been to go into an empty room, sometimes on my own and now thankfully with other comrades, and then to start from really nothingness and to see what, for me, music is an important one. So my music designer friend, when he plays something, it moves and it sets the imagination going, and then it just flows from there.
I watched Whole Day and I was surprised that you have used Western music. I don't know whether it was specially composed for it or you have used recorded music for it.
No, it just so happened that I improvised to that music, and I thought there will come a moment when I will put away that music and I will ask a friend to design music freshly for the piece. But when I gave it to 2 different friends, they said the music and the movement is so inherently linked that, sorry, we can't do much about it.
What is the music?
It's Philip Glass, which is of course so much used and abused and everything in the West. But at that point in 1993, I don't know, it came into my hands probably at a moment. It was my first solo, and it did something for me. And strangely, now when I look back on it, I think it had a kind of strange commonality with Kathakali music. There is something about Kathakali music that's very stretched. The singer hardly takes a breath, and the music is very stretched. And there's something about Philip Glass which is very repetitive, and it just carries on, and then a new element comes in, and then that carries on, and very slowly it gets layered. And now when I look back on it, I think I was able to improvise to that music for my very first solo, only because it was somewhere close to what I was used to in Kathakali.
That can be very interesting because I have done it in my workshops. I use Beethoven's 5th Concerto, The Emperor, and I didn't tell
in which one?
The Emperor.
No, in which, for which play?
No, I'm talking about my workshop and how I saw how my students react to the music. And they were listening to the concerto, the second part of the concerto, and I said, you can do King Lear, try. And they were all raw students from NST, that was about 10 years ago. And suddenly, something lit up in them, suddenly, the real actor in them came alive.
Did you say something to them to get them going when you gave them the music, something that pushed them along?
No, I told them it's King Lear. Just the name, I didn't tell them the name of the concerto. I said, you can act King Lear maybe, listen to this music and find out if you can do that. And they did that scene between Cordelia and King Lear, no, let us away to prison, that kind of thing. It was so beautiful. But while watching Khuldo, for a minute, not even a minute, for a few seconds, I thought, why Western music? Because the Manto story is so very Indian, so very ours. So maybe you could have used different music. But I forgot about it within no time, because I respond very deeply to Western classical music also. But I was curious about whether the music was specially composed. But do you ever do that? Do you specially compose?
Yes, in fact, after Kholdo and the job, I was lucky enough to meet a sound designer, and then I've not ever since needed to look at pre-recorded music, because then we make it. In fact, the action and the music and the image get built together in the rehearsal process. But just to get back to this Western, and when you were talking, I was wondering, as you are there, do you sit alone in a room and write? And is it the archetypal playwright who is in solitude? Or do you write anywhere and everywhere, or does it have to be in your room?
No, I am a very methodical writer. I think I write 5 pages a day.
Oh, that's it. And then you put it
dinner, and that is always after my brunch. And I receive phone calls, and there is music playing all the time. And most of the time it's Western music, because I love it. And I'm very glad when there is a knock on the door, because I like to run away from my writing. Because suddenly people find me very hospitable when I am writing, because I like to drop everything and receive people. That's how I'm in.
But while you're writing and while your mind is at work and the pen is flowing and so on, do questions of what makes up the Western and what makes up the so-called Eastern or Indian, do these sort of questions play in your mind?
No, not for me, at least. And I'm surprised at this myself, because I come from a musical family. I mean, there was a lot of Indian classical music. I mean, they were so pakka kana people. Even Natya Sangeet was frowned upon. Natya Sangeet was considered a test of. It was considered an immature test. But when I came to Nagpur as a student, I gradually began to listen to this, and somehow I'm completely fascinated by Western classical music, although I don't claim I understand it. And I see, I cannot really say that this is better than that, and there is no. I respond to it equally well. It has great emotional content.
No, but that's music. But when it weaves itself into your text, would you say there are elements of what makes up the
Sonata,
yeah.
The play. I was listening to that throughout my writing days. For 5 days I was listening to Sonata. But there is one thing about music I have been wanting to ask you, because this has bothered me for a pretty long time. Particularly after Dasha, where live music was used. People, the cast sang. It was extraordinary music, and it worked so well, and it got integrated with the content and the production so well. But normally, in Marathi theatre at least, music is used as embellishment. It is imposed, And I keep fighting with my friends. I said that I am watching a play, and if it is not live music, if the actors themselves do not sing, and if you are playing Kishori Amonkar's group on the soundtrack, why would I look at you? I would rather close my eyes and listen to music. So live music is a very important aspect for me, and fortunately in our theatres, very few people, at least in Maharashtra, have been using it. But I see live music in Niratil's theatre, and then your theatre, obviously. What do you think of recorded music being used?
The point I'm at now, I find it very challenging to have, because my sound designer, he puts a lot of stuff on his computer, on his track. So it's like a backup track, and then on top of it he will play live, because we still want to keep the element of improvisation alive on stage. So we know that there's a beat playing at the back which will tie me into the beat, and yet in a particular show, like it happened recently, we were performing, and the episode was around Gujarat, and we did 2 shows. On the first day, the audience, and it happened to be in Hamburg, they said, "Kuch theek se samajh mein nahi aaya," the references that we were talking about. So I sort of kept that in mind, that on day 2 of the show, somehow while the music is playing and I have to do my the episode on Gujarat, is let me leave myself open to improvise so that I can get closer to my audience. So Oshim had his backtrack, but then he kind of suddenly he found me switching and moving and going into other territories, and I took up this recent case of this, is it a police commissioner or who, Wazara? Yeah. So that whole episode suddenly came to my head because it's so recent, and I launched into it, and then he just kept up with me. But there was always the beat that kept both of us tied. And now we have such a good relationship that when I'm sort of nearing the end of a little, what do you call it, like an alap, when it reaches the end, we have a way of knowing that it's coming, and then he'll do something live to give it a final punch. And either he will switch off the backtrack before that, or he'll let it play on till we get into the next episode. So it's a mix and match. But what's very frightening is if he is only doing live music and we tell ourselves we are going to improvise on stage.
Do you surprise each other with this?
Completely.
Yeah. That can be very interesting, and that makes it really live, you know.
And what we've told each other is, if you get terribly surprised by me or me by you, let's just go for a silence. And then let's see what's the first moment that gets picked up, because let's not blow each other's brains out on the stage. And also we've got an audience. We owe it to them to make sense of what we're doing on stage. So if we're getting into each other's shoes and not making much sense, let's just go silent. And of course, as you know in your texts, these silences and pauses are wonderful things, yeah?
And that is something I will definitely talk about. But since we are talking about music, I would like to ask whether you have been using, since you are a trained Kathakali dancer, whether that music has helped you in your productions, whether you use it or you use only Western music.
No, I think you're very hung up on Kholdo. That was made in 93.
No.
I've moved on quite a bit. Now I don't know how to categorize the music that we make. I don't know. It's Indian now. The spectrum of Indian music is so wide. Yeah. So our influences are many. We've done a show called A Deep Fried Jam, which has.
I have a CD of that.
Yeah. So that has Indian flavors. It has all kinds. I mean, hopefully it's very universal. It's pop. It's got Jimi Hendrix. It's got things very Indian. But yes, Kathakali music has influenced me very, very deeply. So much so that I learn it now. I want to be able to sing it because I want to be able to gain the kind of breath control and the kind of holding a note that they do. And very importantly, how to sing with drama. Because a good Kathakali singer, he learns Carnatic music, but his voice is like another actor, and so he actually knows how to punch the word depending on who's on stage. The first shloka, even while the curtain is up, to introduce the character, from the very first note that he picks up and the way he will sing the shloka, you're supposed to get a sense of the character. So that kind of dramatic way of singing is something that I don't have it. I try and imitate it. Sometimes.
There is a lot of improvisation in your kind of theatre. I'm quite sure every show is different from the earlier shows.
Some bits. We like to fix. It's also very challenging to fix things. And how to fix and then leave a little window of improvisation in between and say, this will be, and then, like sometimes Oshim will just record some little news item that of the day of the show, and he won't tell me about it, and he'll just play it on stage, and I must then take off from it.
It's like classical music. You have this hour, and the framework is decided, and you have to operate within that frame,
yeah.
Right? But what is the role of the text in your work? You change it? Do you change it?
When I'm not on stage?
Yeah.
The text made by me, the bits that we must be where he's waiting for a punch word for me, I must get to that word. But in between, yeah, sometimes. But I'm actually quite careful, and I've actually reached a point where I'm quite bored with my own text. And I think, I'm not a playwright.
Wow. all playwrights get bored with their texts.
Well, for a performer who makes her own text, I think my text is not punchy enough because I'm not in control over my words. I haven't actually sat and said, shall I use this word instead, and shall I not use the rest of that sentence? It's all fairly arbitrary. And I would love to be able to have someone who comes into our improvisations and goes away and comes back with the text and says, come, use this now. I've watched you, I've got the sense of what you're doing. Here's some really crisp text for you to use.
You mightn't like it, I'm quite sure, because you are doing your own stuff and you know what lines you want to say. I don't think I can select the lines for you, can I?
If we talk about it, and if you have come into my territory, which is the territory of improvisation, then you go away and write something, and you and I have nice good grey hair now. I think I certainly have reached a point where I feel there's nothing to lose really. No harm trying lots of things. Whatever I wanted to do, I've done. Now I'm a little bored with myself.
So am I. So are we talking to each other?
So, thank you very much. The evening ends here. We are both very bored.
Well, we are not bored with each other because
but
we are so dissimilar. We are so dissimilar.
No, I think there are many similarities. And I want to bring up one very mischievous one. I was reading his texts in the last 3 or 4 days. And I have to, at this point, narrate a little episode which will, I'm sure, excite you into talking about your work excitedly. I was in JNU they asked me to talk about my work, and I showed them 4 or 5 clips. And at the end of it, one MA student raised his hand, and I thought he's going to ask me some terribly erudite question, and I'm going to have to give a fairly simple answer, and that'll be fine. He raises his hand, and he stands up, and he says, Madam, would you say that you are sex obsessed? This was about 6-7 months ago. So I went into total silence, not the kind of silences I'm used to on stage. I was completely, my lips were sealed. I've never in my life got a question like this. So I thought for a minute, and my answer is not so important, but I had to look back for a fleeting second at all my work and think, so am I sex obsessed? Is it that all my work has sex in it, or sex, and as we know there's gender, and of course I keep getting this question, because you're a woman, do you think all your work is gender based, etc. But reading his work and more of your recent stuff, there's a way in which I think sex and gender plays out quite a bit in the, I don't know how recent, I don't know where they lie in your, but I'm thinking of, well, there's Sonata, there's, what am I thinking of? There is even autobiography and Actor Exits and
Actor Exist is the latest.
Yeah. Somewhere.
But the rest of the plays are pretty old, I guess.
No, and Garbo.
Garbo was written in 1971.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I was reading them all together, and there's a way in which suddenly, where sex and gender suddenly come to the fore, and there's a way in which you play out issues through the business of male and female.
Well, this is quite a revolution, because I had never looked at my work like this, and thank you for this.
I'm doing the MA students
yes.
role now.
I don't know, because initially, yes, there was a lot of accent on sex. And, I was young at that time, but gradually, I don't know, I thought that I have shifted the focus from that particular human experience to other experiences.
I gave the same answer, by the way.
Yes. And over the years, I mean, I really envy you in many ways, because you're such a wonderful actor. Why aren't you in my place? You should be in Sonata, in a play like Sonata.
I would like to.
Yes. Really?
So if you know of a director who's doing, when I watch actors like that, I was watching Vada, I haven't done a naturalistic play for like 25-30 years.
Supposing if I wrote a solo.
No, I don't want to do a solo. I'm bored with solos. I want to be with other actors.
Yeah, there's one question I wanted to ask you. Most of your work is solo.
By punishment.
Is that really a punishment? I thought you prefer to do solos.
No. I think I don't know. I looked around in the city for. I even would go to NSD sometimes to perform and say, throw the gauntlet and say, आपको ऐसा काम करना है तो आइए, हम दिल्ली में ही रहते हैं, हमारे स्टूडियो में आइए. Nobody picked up. Nobody said yes. So I was, in fact, I think I was forced into solo playing, and of course over the years now, I suppose I've developed my own kind of language, but. I'd love to play with other actors who come from a completely different genre, whatever, altogether.
I had a very, wrong impression. I thought you prefer to be alone. You prefer.
This is what happens to the solo players. They get stamped with this diva, and she must be wanting to be alone. And all. No, not true.
Personally, I think the best time in theatre is when 3 or 4 plays are rehearsing together. That is the most joyous, glorious time, I guess. And if the playwright is around, if the director allows the playwright to be around, because a playwright is like a poor relative.
Tell me, do they allow you in? Do they say, Mahesh, please come in, watch our rehearsals?
Vijaya did, always. Dr. Laghu did, always. Satyadev allowed me to be there, but he asked me to keep my mouth shut.
Because he does a lot of the talking.
Yes. And anyway, who wants to fight? So. But I always had a wonderful working relationship with my directors. I was very lucky. But even then, I had to learn a lot about silences and leaving spaces for my actors, etc. That I had to do on my own. My seniors never told me about it somehow, because they also changed their perspective, I should say. I was talking about the rehearsal time. I personally like the rehearsal time because that is one of the most intense experiences we can have in theatre, I guess. You meet every day from 10 to 5 for 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And that is where you have to drop all your defenses. You hate each other, you like each other. But that is one time when you really establish a contact with each other on a human level, which we don't do. The moment you are outside of the rehearsal room, you become a different person. As a playwright, I was often a part of the rehearsal, particularly during Vadachirabandi and later on some other plays also. And I realized that this is the most beautiful, painful, yes, but it is excruciatingly beautiful, I can put it that way, for me. And the rest of the things are frills, it's fringe benefits, you can say. Doing your work, being appreciated, reviews and photographs and interviews, that is a bonus. What do you think? The real fun of theatre is those 3 weeks or 4 weeks of rehearsal.
Luckily with me, it doesn't take 3 and 4 weeks because I think I'll be a spent force. We improvise very intensively for maybe a week maximum, and then the tedious part begins. What we do actually is we improvise. A friend shoots the whole improvisation for some days on a video camera, and then I have to sit and watch these reams and reams and hours of improvisation and try and see if some kind of a show that holds together, whether it can be pulled out of these many days of improvisations. And then I play some of the selected bits back to my friends and say, hey, listen, I'm thinking of this kind of a through line through all the stuff that we've made. And then they give feedback. Then I have to go back and do more homework and transcribe all of the text that I was improvising, and then go back to the sound designer and say, will you please reproduce just that, because that was very good. And then he will have long battles with me about, I can't reproduce, I'm a musician, I've got to do it afresh each time. And I said, no, please do that. So these sort of things. And then I also play a lot with my camera, with my filmmaker friend. Really, for hours together, simply looking at different possibilities of him and me, both of us holding 2 cameras, sometimes me dropping the camera and acting, sometimes picking up that same object, and all kinds of permutations and combinations. And then after this is over, one has to then pluck these improvisations and re-rehearse them. And I am not very good at saying, ओके इतना रखते हैं, उसके बाद थोड़ा सा अब सेल्फ कॉन्शियसली कुछ नया बनाते हैं और इम्प्रोवाइजेशन को छोड़ देते हैं. आई कांट डू इट. आई हैंग ऑन टू माई इम्प्रोवाइजेशंस फॉर डियर लाइफ because I'm very unlike you. I can't sit like this as Maya and be creative. I'd be very lousy. I have to get into some kind of trance, and that's where music really helps. And some empty room so that something can begin to happen in that emptiness. So I don't know what your question was, but...
No, I mean, I was wondering how you would relate to other actors if you are working...
I think very well.
Yeah, because... No, I mean, there is a more important question which I haven't really asked you yet. Your work is very postmodern work, and that is what I would say. If at all I am asked to put a label on it, I don't like labeling things. In fact, it's wonderful theatre, very interesting, full of vitality. But I don't know. I mean, today we are talking to each other, and I know we would like to act in a play with 3 or 4 more actors, and the text perhaps is written by some other person, etc., etc. But till this moment, I would have been afraid of coming to you with the text and asked you to read it, because I had a feeling that maybe you do not have you don't have a very high opinion of the written texts, the kind of text people have been writing here in India.
No, I think I don't do a kind of theatre that is naturalistic, where the living time, the real world time is the same time as stage time, where like in a Chekhov play or like in a Vada Chirebandi, where people table with a lot of pieces of a puzzle, and something keeps telling her you to step out into the world to find the rest of the pieces. But she's not a woman who's leading some kind of very particular life of a character. I would be very interested to go to a kind of text, if I may be very frank, like a Vada Chirebandi, more than an actor exits or a Dharmaputra kind of text, which is more expressionistic. Or I also don't like labels, but whatever it is, it's non-naturalistic. I'd be very interested to pick up a very naturalistic play like Vada, and then to see what happens if very insidiously some kind of circumstantial, or if a camera were to come in, or if I don't know what, some other layer were to come into it. And so we would need a very open kind of, ground on which the text is also an actor, and then other elements can come into it. I don't know, yeah.
Would you allow that?
Yeah, indeed. Because over the years, I mean, I have realized that the actor is the king in theatre. A playwright is really not as important as the actor. I will go into detail if you don't mind. Initially, some of my work was very verbose, and it was only gradually that I realized that, to begin with, I was very dissatisfied with the kind of acting that I saw in our theatre, Marathi theatre. And I said that these actors are very, very illustrative. They explain everything, and suddenly I realized that, well, the playwright is responsible for this. Actor is an actor, he wants to act, and if he is given so many lines, he has to say them because the director insists, the playwright is around, he insists. But I don't leave any open spaces for the actor to fill out. That is when I realized that it is the actor who delivers the goods, and if I am a responsible playwright, and if I want to be a good playwright, I have to create empty spaces for as many as possible, so that the actors would fill them out. And again, the spaces that would be filled out by the actors, he would mean something totally different from what was intended by the playwright, but it doesn't really matter. I mean, I have come to this point where I wouldn't mind an actor putting in his own meanings in the spaces and taking a departure from my intentions, okay?
If I may interrupt, we're leaving out the third person because that person is not here, which is the director.
Yes.
And I think this sort of playmaking, if I may call it, where then you wear your playwright's hat in a different way, the director must wear it in a different way, different from the kind of director who would have done a Vada. I must be a different kind of performer, and it then is a kind of ensemble production where all of us are making it together, but with our skills. It's just that we are twisting them in another direction. And I think that would be very exciting. I don't know, I think people in the audience must have... I don't really know of anything really exciting that's happened where playwrights, Anu, if you can, or playwrights like yourself who've been for years been writing as a playwright, and then suddenly off on another track where you are then creating, where the production is really getting made in the rehearsal. The rehearsal room becomes the genesis and the source of material also.
Yeah. For me, minimalism is the keyword now. My text has to be very sparse with a lot of empty spaces, and they would be deciphered, filled out by my actors, and if I'm around, maybe I'll contribute something to the journey in this quest. And that is, for me, more important than writing a fully illustrated explanatory text.
So you've done something like this where you've left...
Well, I tried something like this when I wrote Sonata. You will see Sonata. I mean, Sonata can be interpreted in many ways, because now I have suddenly realized the meaning of subtext or subtext, you know. And that is possible only when you put a lot of faith in the actors and put a lot of responsibility on their shoulders. For me, actor is the ultimate supreme god in theatre.
Marathi theatre has also a tradition of improvisation. Yeah? I mean, in Launi isn't there improvisation?
Launi again is a folk form. It's not urban theatre. Now it has been urbanized, yes, and hopelessly polluted, I should say. I don't know, because as a young kid, going to see a Launi thing was out of question. Coming from a kind of family I did. Improvisation, there is something like Baitakichi Launi. I mean, if you sit down and sing and act, you don't stand and dance. It's like Mujra. In the traditional Mujra, you sit down and act and sing. You know, you use only the upper part of your body. In Baitakichi Launi was like that. The woman would sit and begin with her eyes, begin with her eyebrows.
What about Tamasha?
This Launi is from Tamasha. Launi is an integral part of Tamasha.
Yeah, but I don't know why I'm speaking from what kind of memory. In one of them, there is more. There is an element of improvisation. The actor can.
Yes.
Can.
It's called work.
The
Tamasha begins with work, where the Songarya or the comedian and Lord Krishna come, and then they improvise a lot. And there are many references to topical things, and that covers everything. That covers politics, that covers what has happened today. You have to be prepared for that. I mean, they read the morning paper every day and incorporate all that in their...
Can you think of some such actors who then, if taken out of that context and put into this other context that we are talking about now, with a playwright like you and some other actors, where someone like me and some director, I don't know who that director is, by the way, and then would be able to place themselves in this new playing field and would still retain that the vivacity of improvisation. And
they have tried to borrow this idiom from the Tamasha tradition. I mean, there are quite a few plays in Marathi. Sariga Sari is one of them. But it doesn't somehow work.
Why?
I have no idea. Because I think the Tamasha artists, although illiterate, have a very body sense of humor, and they are uninhibited. They are more connected to what's happening around than the urban actor. And the urban actor is very conscious of the audience he's playing for, you know. So there are many inhibitions, and the vitality of the form, that particular form, is completely missing in urban theatre.
But why were you saying the other doesn't work when the folk actor comes here? Is that what you said? Does not work?
The folk artist, are you talking about the folk artist?
Folk is not a good word.
Let's say tamasha with the rule. Tamasha is folk, very much folk. But I think it has something to do with the actors who are acting. The tamasha artists are totally different, and the urban actor is perhaps more inhibited and more conditioned, and he doesn't take risks, I think, the way the tamasha artist does.
What do you do in your workshops?
My workshops, I mean, they are playwriting workshops to begin with, and I do not expect my students to be playwrights. I want them to be familiar with the creative process of one particular playwright. That is me. But I am quite sure if there are other playwrights who will hold these workshops, they will be discovering new ways of approaching the material. And we have discovered that the creative process of actors, directors and the writers can be identical up to a particular moment, the quest and the discovery. I call it detective game. Like if I am writing about a character, I have to do a lot of detective work, there is a lot of guesswork involved. And if I leave empty spaces in a text, the actors have to do exactly the same thing. They have to be detectives and find out as many things as possible about the actors they are portraying. It can be very exciting, and sometimes it has benefited some of my students, sometimes it hasn't. But I get more out of that than them, I'm quite sure, because they come up with so many insights. Have you incorporated, I mean, I don't know, this is such a cliche question again, but I'll ask you all this question all the same. Have you incorporated the idiom from Kathakali into
Not self-consciously, not so far. I think I would like to do a production where I am continuously looking at the form and making whatever I'm making. But so far I have not at all. But lots of friends have told me that when you're on stage doing your own work, we see some connection. We see the performer who's been trained in the Kathakali form standing now on stage and doing her own creation, but we see that energy in you. I don't like to look at this question too much, because I think if I start analyzing what it is I do, then I'm a little frightened of losing it. But so far I've thought Kathakali is such a full form that I don't want to have to look at it and say, अच्छा चलो उसका वो element निकाल के देखते हैं क्या होता है. But now, having done so many years of performing, I feel I have another set of eyes, and I can look at Kathakali differently now. And I think it would be very challenging to look at, for instance, the whole array of rhythm cycles in Kathakali. To look at the connection between rhythm and character. To look at the connection between the dramatic moment, what is happening to Ravana at this moment, and then the fact that they have suddenly made it all very slow, and how does the body and the mudra and the emotion and the rasa sit on this very stretched out rhythm, and can I then play with it? And of course I will not use mudra when I'm doing my own thing, but yeah, so all of this I find very exciting. And I did a tiny experiment, which was, I was in my room. I'm very fond of the character of Ravana, and Ravana in Kathakali has some very beautiful sequences. He's the one character in Kathakali who has a whole hour and a half on his own on stage. Usually Kathakali has many characters on stage playing out their roles, like in theatre. And there's this moment in one story where he's playing his mother. He comes on stage as himself, and then he says, okay, let me be my mother for a minute. And then it's about the mother holding this baby and looking into the night. And as I was rehearsing it one night, and it's very long, this looking at the night, and looking at a Viman that is crossing the skies and all that. And one day as I was looking at it, only because the rhythm was so slow, that somehow Lady Macbeth came into my consciousness. And I did this for a little small audience, and it was improvised. I kept Ravana in my mind, and somewhere I kept Lady Macbeth in my mind, and I learned a bit of her text. And then I said, let's see how it comes out. I have no idea. And I learned the lines of Come Thick Night and Fill My Breast with Direst Cruelty, that whole soliloquy of Lady Macbeth. And I'd like to take that up as an exercise. I don't know what will come of it, but keeping Ravana, keeping Lady Macbeth. And when I look at both of them, I think there's something about their circumstances that are not similar, but there's something that draws you and repels you from. There's something. They say Ravana has as many boons as he has curses. He's such an accomplished man, and so is she. And yet they don't seem to have any control over life's forces and where it will take them. At least that's the way I'm looking at it.
Are you bringing these two characters together?
Sorry?
Are you bringing these two characters together on stage?
I don't know what will happen, but right now I find them very exciting.
It's uncanny. I was talking to a friend half an hour ago, and I said, well, I'm writing something where Achilles and Duryodhana and my school teacher will come together and talk to each other.
So tell us a bit more, and particularly about the school teacher.
I don't know. I was telling them my experience in Pakistan. I was in Karachi and we went to see the necropolis. It's a 6 square mile township, full of कब्र जिसे कहते हैं, कितनी हैं वहाँ पे, huge palatial things and very small tiny things, and we were wandering around. Girish was with us, Girish and Saras, and I thought this is a very queer place to go, because there is not a single blade of grass. There is all dry, parchy land, and these huge monumental buildings, small buildings, and all the corpses sleeping so nicely in their covers and dreaming endless dreams. And that thing haunted me for a very long time. And suddenly I realized that everybody has his own necropolis within him, not harder. And that is where, history and past and future and your fantasy world and your dreams and reality all get mixed up. So I thought maybe you are on the same trip. I don't know. Maybe we could work together on something like this. You have done Shakespeare in Kathakali, have you?
I have played, yes, my guru wrote the verse. Kathakali always you have to first write the verse. That's the starting point. So he took, we started by only looking at the scene when Othello walks in and says, "Hast thou prayed?" And then the smothering. And we played out just that scene for 1.5 or so hours. And that's when I think Kathakali works the best, when you take a dramatic moment and really spin it out. So I played Desdemona, and it was very, very magical. Because you're standing between these two massive pillars, the huge pillar of Kathakali and the huge pillar of Shakespeare. And I had read Othello so many times, so in a strange way the lines were resounding in my head, even as the singer was singing in Malayalam, and all sorts of things happening. And it's also, this is why I like Shakespeare, because in that iambic meter, he'll actually, the way the words are, they're so stretched that you can stretch an emotion across those beautiful words, just in the way that it happens in Kathakali, I think. And so they come together very beautifully. What does not work in Kathakali is when you try and play out a whole story of Shakespeare, then it becomes a needless storytelling exercise, and you've lost the drama of it.
It must be very taxing for an actor to stretching a moment for 90 minutes can be.
And it was only about the praying and the not praying, and then of course and of course these things are very troublesome in Kathakali. How do you do the smothering? Because simply picking up a pillow and putting it on a face full of makeup will not work. So those battles with theatre, they are very interesting, how to resolve them and so on. But it was wonderful, and I still have not played the Othello part of it. he does it very beautifully, the Guru. Yeah, so I've done Desdemona. I don't think I have done any other Shakespeare in Kazakh.
No, but when you do Desdemona, you choose one moment and stretch it for 90 minutes. Do you rehearsal or is everything pre-decided, or there is scope for improvisation in every performance?
No, the text is there just as it is in Shakespeare. Hast thou prayed, and her response, it goes like this, in a particular tal that the Guru has written it in. And of course, in between there are little soliloquies, little asides, where you're talking to yourself and saying, why is he like this, and why is his eyebrows suddenly curled, and why does he look at me like this? But it's all sort of in a mercurial fashion. It's like at the speed at which you talk to yourself, you must do your mudras or half do them. There are those little moments. And because that whole night scene is so beautifully silent,
yes.
We also decided to use another kind of drum which is not usually used, and so it was very beautifully, yeah. Again, I've forgotten your question, but
it doesn't matter. Let us ramble on.
yeah. You may want to stop us now. It may be an hour by now.
Just wanted to know so I know that he's a playwright, so word will have particular connotation for him. But just the importance of the word in your work and
I am trying to use as sparsely as possible. I mean, in fact, Vijay once said to me, Mahesh, do you write pauses first and then put in dialogue in between? And I said, exactly, that is what I really want to do. Exactly. Because if I can convey what I mean, if I convey an experience in as few words as possible, I would be very happy. I mean, this is quite a journey from initial writing to this point, because suddenly I have realized that it is the actor who will deliver the goods. If he's a good actor, he would know what I want to do and still add something more to it. I mean, I don't know what Maya's position is as far as the text is concerned, because she writes her text and she has already told us what she does with the text. But I still would like to know, if I wrote a text and gave it to you, and if you decide to do it, what would be your approach to it?
It all depends. You seem to have one range. You go from a Vada Cheravandi to an actor excerpts to, you have different ways in which you use text. So I would need to know, as I said before, I would be more drawn to a very supernaturalistic, because I don't do it. So I would find it very exciting.
Let's revive Vada.
I would like to see what happens to one of those women if she were to suddenly place herself 20 years later in another locale, even while she's playing Vada, in the time of Vada.
Which woman? All those women?
Maybe one of them. Play with time in it. So that you go 20 years after that family has crumbled, or I don't know what, it's not too clear, but as I was watching this lovely actor playing her thing, I was suddenly thinking, where is she and where is the sonata, the Kusum character, Kusum Haidar, what is that spectrum about?
I know, but my primary interest is human beings, individuals. That is the focal point. I'm not interested in certain themes, or I don't have any ideological thrust, nothing. It is the individuals who matter, and they are center stage. So, I mean, maybe I see a variety of people around me, and when I feel bonded with them, I like to write about them. Somehow I've never been driven by a theme. Some people select it. That is something beyond my comprehension. You cannot select a theme and weave a play around it. I can't do that. And once you have decided to write about a few individuals together in a given space, Well, if I have the ability of a good playwright, I would be able to create many subtexts and create a mood which is indefinable, which is perhaps beyond the grasp of intellect. I mean, that is the ultimate aspiration of any playwright, I guess. I want to tell a story, I want to show you certain individuals, but while doing it, if I can transcend all these barriers and go to that area which is beyond the grasp of intellect, I would love to do that. Most of the time we fail, I'm quite sure. That is the ultimate for any artist.
I'll tell you what my problem is. I'm completely bored with, and I don't want to go anywhere near making plays about our little urban existence and what happens when we go to work and we come back and we have a fight with the wife, and sometimes it goes the existential way, sometimes it goes into... I mean, this is a dilemma for me. When I think naturalism, then I think I'm an urban actor, and all of that about urban life is very boring for me. And so for me, it's only interesting if it can become a takeoff point. So it's like, one woman enters her puja room and she starts praying, and it's like even while she's praying, somebody is mass producing t-shirts in some Texas city with Hanuman on it and is busy getting picked up by the cops by some Hindutva waving guy who's saying कि ये नहीं चलेगा, आपने कैसे bathroom में गणेश जी को टांग के रख दिया है, and some Taiwanese worker is mass producing under some Chinese imperialist whatever. I don't know, this kind of where from globalization to a woman sitting in her puja room, all of that is happening in the course of a minute. Then it's very exciting. But this simply following her around and then, this this petty existence of ours, it just doesn't, and I'm sure you're there as well.
I have been accused of many things, and one of them is I do not reflect contemporary reality. I mean, that is a must for us Marathis at least. I mean, I must talk about bride burning, I must talk about Dalits, I must talk about communal riots. If I do that, I am a responsible writer, otherwise I am not. And I keep telling that I am writing about people I see in everyday life, and am I not writing about contemporary people? I mean, Varashirindi people or Sonata women are very contemporary. But what interests me more is the inner landscape. I am not interested in their day-to-day struggle and how they go to a shop and how they go to the bank, and I'm not interested in that. But this is a big deal in Marathi theatre, contemporary reality. Perhaps you are accused of that. Have they done it? Not yet.
Well, thankfully, I did a lot of street theatre way back. And I've done the play on Brightburn, on Dowry, and I've done...
You have been very clever. Saved your reputation.
So one comrade is sitting, Anu and I used to do street theatre long years ago, but I just want to say, I'll come to you. I want to say this, just to put it on record. For me, it's been very interesting. I think with my last show, it's been a return to street theatre in a strange way, because I think without realizing it, was picking up current issues and in a very frontal sort of way, putting them in not a proscenium, but whatever, a non-street theatre situation, and giving it a completely different treatment. So I'm dealing with Manipur, and dealing with Iram Sharmila, and dealing with the Andhra suicides, farmer suicides, but very differently. Very differently, because the medium is different. Because there's a camera and there's music, and it's not realistic theatre.
But you feel like talking about these social issues, current social issues?
Because it's about improvisation. When we go into a room and we are saying, whatever happens will happen, sometimes it happens that what you've read in the papers that morning finds its way into the improvisation. So it's as chancy as that. It's not because I decided.
I have tried to analyze myself, and I really haven't found any answer. Like, I come from Yotmal district, where the maximum number of farmer suicide, I mean about 5,000 suicides in the last 4 years. I come from a farming family, and I feel very, very deeply about that issue, so much so that I am not an activist or anything, but for the first time in my life, 2 years ago, I invited a meeting of writers and playwrights and lawyers and architects and on the middle class, affluent middle class in Nagpur. And we discussed the whole issue, and I said that unless we take up this issue and the middle class, affluent middle class starts talking about it, the government may not feel that it is an important issue, etc., etc., etc. But when I sit down to write, I do not want to write about it.
Yeah. I think sometimes things that are very close to you, I am very deeply moved by how much pain women in Indian society have to go through, but I do not want to bring it on stage thinking, oh, I'm going to bring suffering on stage. I won't do it. Sorry, we must, shall we just at this point, she obviously wanted to.
Then I know post-modernism sort of जो convictions हैं play की, you have been talking about the spaces, you are talking about many brilliant things, which I have been introduced today. Like, though I know it in literature, it is happening. Ma'am, I would like to know one thing. What about the एक जो आम दर्शक है, जो एक आम जो viewer है, उसके बारे में आप क्या सोचती हैं? This is in that context of your Khuldo, because this कहानी जो थी, it was very realistic कहानी, and the way your solo may be a brilliant performance. But I just want to know, as a darshak, as a viewer जो है, एक ordinary viewer, we were lost. We didn't know what to say.
Then why do you think it's brilliant?
Because performance, as you are saying, I'm trying to understand. That time I could not understand when I saw your this thing. But now when you are explaining all these things, I'm making two and two together. But still I'm talking from the side of a darshak, a shrota. उसके आपका जो viewer है, उसके बारे में आप क्या कहेंगे? Please.
I'm very troubled by the term आम viewer, आम दर्शक. मुझे ये कौन है ये जना नहीं मालूम. I don't think there is anybody known as an आम दर्शक. I think each one sitting there is very particular to themselves. All I do know is that because most of my work is improvised, I just hope to reach out to some bit of you in your inside, which is your subconscious territory. I have played Khuldo in very many different countries in the hope that they will make their own interpretation of it, and I'm very happy if they. I understand what you're saying कि लोग कहते हैं कि ये क्या समझ में नहीं आया. But they don't need that samajh when they go into different other kinds of experiences. Music हम सुनने जाते हैं तो हम समझ के साथ तो नहीं सोचते हैं कि हमको समझना है. There's so many Indian experiences actually which are very inherent to our culture, where we don't go with the expectation कि हमको समझना है. I think the more kinds of different theatre productions we have in this country, maybe people will go in with a more open expectation. I'll just give you one example. एक बार जब मैंने यहाँ पर Khuldo किया तो one young man came to me and said, I have to talk to you because I have just come from my village. I have never seen a show in a theatre. ऐसे और हमने तब वो शो शायद श्रीराम बेसमेंट में किया था. And he said, I have to sit down and tell you what I saw in that show. And he gave me such an amazing interpretation of it, which was in many ways much better than what I had tried to do. But he was a man who, call him Aam Darshak, he was certainly not a theatre goer. But he had made his own. I would like to say, as an actor who's talking from this side of the fence, that I think more and more it's up to us, theatre people, to do different kinds of shows and productions where the audience can come in not with the expectation कि हमको text मिलेगा, and text मिलेगा मतलब text will be the primary means to understand and to get into this play. कि अपने को इतना खुला छोड़ें कि हम receive करें, हम किसी एक experience के अंदर जाने के लिए तैयार हो जाएं. Maybe I get moved. Maybe while I'm getting moved, I'm not totally understanding. कोई बात नहीं. And of course, I do take the responsibility for if you're still feeling कि ये क्या हुआ. Then some of the responsibility is mine that I didn't make it clear. Some of it I have to let go, saying. Some of it I have to re-rehearse and make it better. Some of it I have to say कि doesn't matter.
No, ma'am, the thing is that the theory point of view, it is perfectly all right.
What theory?
Theory means that this is we are using different techniques, we are leaving it open, we want that I should conceive it in my own way. And everybody has the right to conceive a story, a poem, similarly the theatre. But still I feel theatre is a different form and it should reach to the
Today's audience is very different from what it was even 2 years ago. This is never static. People are changing. The way they look at things change. Advertisements are changing. Everything is changing. Our expectations change. So I don't have to reach you because you are not some given mass of people who is unchanging. You are changing all the time and so am I. And I also become a darshak sometimes. So I do not believe in this, I'm sorry, that I have to reach down to someone. I would like you to come into this.
मेरा जवाब बहुत उद्दंड रहेगा, आपको खराब लगेगा, पर मैं देता हूँ जवाब। जब आम दर्शकों के लिए चीज़ दोहराई जाती हैं तो उसके जैसा मुझे भी सवाल है कि भाई ये आम दर्शक है कौन? आम दर्शक क्या सिर्फ आएगा, बैठेगा और हम उसे प्री डाइजेस्टेड फूड देंगे? उससे कुछ कोशिश करनी नहीं है। हम केसरभाई केरकर का गाना सुनने जाते हैं या तो कुमार जी का गाना सुनने जाते हैं तो हम ये नहीं कहते हैं कि हमें नहीं समझता इनका गाना, आप नाट्य संगीत गाओ या तो गज़ल गाओ या तो कव्वाली गाओ। किशोर आप करिए कोशिश, किशोरी जी को बताइए कि हमें समझता नहीं है आपका गाना, आप कव्वाली गाइए, क्या होगा? वी डोंट एक्सपेक्ट दोज थिंग्स फ्रॉम म्यूजिशियंस। नाटक जब देखने जाते हैं तो कहते हैं कि हमारी समझ में नहीं आ रहा है, ज़रा तुम अपना डायलूट क्यों नहीं कर देते मटेरियल। तो मैं तो इतना उद्दंड हूँ कि मैं कहता हूँ कि मैं अपने लिए लिखता हूँ, जब करते हैं तो शायद 4 ही लोग देखेंगे और जिनको पसंद है वो आएंगे देखेंगे, और 4 लोगों के साथ मेरा काम शेयर हुआ तो मुझे बहुत आनंद मिलता है। मुझे सब लोगों के पास जाना नहीं है, क्योंकि मेरी पूरी श्रद्धा है कि जिसे नाटक देखना है उसने भी थोड़ी प्रिपरेशन अपनी खुद की करनी जरूरी है। हम गाना सुनने जाते हैं तो एक तो स्टेटस इश्यू भी होता है कि क्लासिकल म्यूजिक सुनते हैं, पर मुझे अगर पता है कि कौन सा राग कैसे गाया जाता है, कब गाया जाता है, उसमें कौन से 5 सुर लगते हैं या 6 सुर लगते हैं, तो कुछ तैयारी रहती है तो गाना हमें समझते हैं। थिएटर देखने जाते हैं तो लोगों को कभी नहीं लगता है कि उसके लिए मुझे खुद को कुछ प्रिपरेशन करनी चाहिए। इसका कारण यह है कि हमारा थिएटर अभी भी रंजन के लिए, फॉर एंटरटेनमेंट है, ऐसी एक धारणा लोगों के दिमाग में है। अब जिस तरह का थिएटर माया करती है हम करते हैं, उसमें रंजना यानी एंटरटेनमेंट वैल्यू तो बिल्कुल नहीं है। हम कुछ करना चाहते हैं, कहना चाहते हैं और वो सीरियस है और वो एक्सप्रेस करने में शायद हमें फेल्योर भी है। तो मेरा ये कहना है कि दर्शकों को भी हमारा फेल्योर शेयर करने की आदत होना जरूरी है, क्योंकि ये जो एक्सरसाइज है नाटक का वो तो आप कंप्लीट करते हैं दर्शक। 10 में से 9 बार आपको डिससेटिस्फैक्शन ही रहेगा। सेटिस्फैक्शन सिर्फ एक ही बात का है कि कुछ नया करने की कोशिश कर रहे हैं, हम उसको शेयर कर रहे हैं। मेरा एक बहुत पुरानी बात है, नाटक था यातनागर मेरा, उसका जब शो हुआ तो ऑडियंस में 3 ही लोग थे। वो 3 लोगों में से एक मैं था और एक विजय मेहता जिन्होंने डायरेक्ट किया था। स्टेज पे 4 एक्टर्स हैं और ऑडिटोरियम में 1-2 रुपए की टिकट लेके आया था। But we were very happy because after the show, that person spent about an hour with us talking about it, and he was talking so intelligently. He had tremendous insight into what we were doing. It was not a great play by any sense, but he was at least conscious that something new is being tried out. तो ऐसे दर्शकों की खोज में हमें।
सर थैंक यू सो मच। मैं आपसे यही सुनना चाह रही थी एक्चुअली।
स्टेज मैनेज्ड।
Hi. I'd like to begin with a comment and then follow it up with a question. I believe no art form is like a tutorial, let it be painting, music, theatre. So we're not here for tutorials for sure. But as you said at the beginning that you were doing a show in Germany, in Hamburg, and the first day you realized that you were not able to relate to the audience. So next day you changed it somehow to improvise it more so that you relate more to the audience.
That's a different kind of relating.
There is. So that means what you're doing, you have to relate to the audience. The first day you relate less. The second day you increase it more because eventually the focus of your performance in your mind is to relate to the audience.
Okay, if I may interrupt, it's a very tiny way of relating that I needed to do. They didn't know the context of Dandi. They didn't know the Dandi March. They didn't know the significance of salt. So I needed to build some kind of context. Now that kind of explaining within the theatre piece, I think, is quite different from what she's asking. I would never do this kind of explaining of what I'm doing, illustrate what I'm doing on stage. But if it is a culturally totally different, people who come from and then I think I would like to be able to get them into the Gandhi atmosphere. If that's getting blocked, then it's no good. So that's different.
So, my point is to bring here is that for you, audience is important. There, it's important because they don't know anything about Gandhi. That's why you wanted to relate the Dandi and get them into the concept of whatever you wanted to tell to them and reach to them. Let's take it the same way in India. There are people who don't know many aspects. Okay, so again,
you'll have to give me an example from a show to say what.
I haven't seen any of your shows, so I really can't comment on it.
We need specificity. Otherwise,
like what I saw it on the video, it was beautiful. It was creative and visually somehow very appealing to me. Now I'll come back to her question. Might be what she wanted to say was that eventually we perform for an audience. An audience is an integral part. I mean, he said that there was one person sitting in an auditorium by the end. Somehow I feel that then theatre is a dying art. I mean, so their performances like these are usually very beautiful, very appealing, and they have their own audience. But somehow her question, as a layman, relates to me more because what she meant by a layman is a man who doesn't watch theatre but still wants to relate to it.
Part of the confusion ensues from...
Yeah, I mean, yeah, watch it and relate to it more.
No,
but what about, if I may just say, what about people who are relating it to it from their own standpoint and making their own meanings, which was not at all to do with what I intended? Isn't that fine?
Indeed. I mean,
yeah. So there's a lot of that also happening, and I don't want to control that. I'm not controlling what meaning they are constructing from it. I can only, if you're posing it as a, is there a question in what you're saying, or is it a remark?
My only question that arose from her, I'm a theatre goer, I love theatre. Okay, there were some things like, I feel that what you might call it as a second layer of expression with projection of the same thing, I found it somehow a little bit, with videos, I find it distracting personally because they take you away from the focus of your actor.
I really think you should wait to watch a whole show before remarking like this, otherwise you will take away from your own,
I'm not talking about your
definition as a theatre viewer. No, I'm saying this very seriously.
I have seen a show recently.
We are very short-circuited, we like to make very quick judgments.
Okay,
and I think in theatre, no wait, let me finish what I'm saying. I think in theatre, we really need to be very patient listeners and watchers. I don't know anything about him, but I better sit here, and even though I've read a lot of his texts now, and I've seen one production of his I've seen, I really do think, and I want to use this forum to say it yet again, we really have to be very patient watchers and listeners. We are far too opinionated, and it cuts away from the experience of theatre, and more importantly, from the possibilities of theatre in this wonderfully diverse country of ours. We need to be much better listeners and viewers and observers.
You want to add something to it? Part of the confusion ensues because of our habit of intellectualizing everything. The urban audience, I know there is a definite difference between the urban audience and the rural audience. When I do Vada Chirebandi in Mumbai or Delhi, the response of the urban audience is to intellectualize the entire experience. Unless they intellectualize it, put it into a slot, put a label on it, they are not happy. They have to understand everything intellectually. I think it is dangerous to intellectualize everything or to try to understand everything intellectually, because theatre tries to go beyond that. The rural audience just sits back and enjoys what's happening. I will quote you an instance, which is a famous instance in the theatre history of world. Waiting for Godot was written and it was rejected by everybody in France, and then it was done in a San Francisco jail. 5,000 inmates, die-hard criminals saw it, and authorities were worried because this is a new plane, nobody understands it, there are no women in the plane, how are these prisoners going to respond to this, and they started doing the play, and within seconds, the entire house, 5,000 criminals, die-hard criminals, were silent, and they sat through the entire production because they did not intellectualize it, but they are sharing the experience of waiting. The urban audience has to learn to de-intellectualize himself when he goes to see my theatre or my theatre.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Sir, if you don't mind, can I add one thing?
Somebody else.
Yes,
Now please, can we have someone else?
Is there somebody else who wants to ask a question or a clarification or make a brief comment? Yes?
I just want to comment.
Just a minute.
This
Mike lead it.
This whole discussion has been out of context because an audience is part of a loop. An audience is not separate from the performance. The audience is as much a performer as the performance. And if that loop is not taking place, then there is something that is happening. But loop does take place. And that is part of the process. And if you do not accept it, then you are opting out of the process. So then it's up to you, whether you want to opt out of it or you want to be in the loop.
I think maybe I didn't put it.
Sorry, may I ask, when you say if you want to opt out, you mean
The audience.
or the actor, or
The
you mean the audience?
He is the audience.
Audience.
Yeah.
The audience.
He is part of the whole.
Thus means the performance includes the audience anyway. So if you didn't understand, you opted out anyway. So then the discussion ends.
I think if the audience is trained enough, there will never be a dearth of audience. And when I say audience, it doesn't have to be 1100 people in an auditorium. Even 10 people, even one person is audience. I mean, don't try to put the entire blame on the theatre workers, But the audience also has to learn its responsibilities, has to groom itself, has to make its tests of more and more sophisticated. You can't go there with an, Kora Kagas, Kori Pali. Particularly the kind of theatre Maya is doing. You have to be a very, very well-groomed person.
This is an unending evening. I want to please retrieve some good name for myself. I'm getting a little worried about being put in this bracket of inaccessible, wonder what she's doing, samajh mein nahi aa raha hai. You asked about words. When I do comedy, I talk non-stop. So for me, text is primary in comedy. I just go on talking, and it's all word-based. And I think my comedy, I hope, is very, very accessible. I hear people laughing. So this is a good thing about comedy. If you hear people laughing, that means it's immediate test of accessible hai ya nahi hai. I just wanted to make that little. I don't think I'm completely in the thing of. You keep pointing to me and saying the theatre she does.
What theatre she does?
I have one question. Long back, Mahesh, you had said that
Hello.
I'm saying sometime back in a discussion you said that no good play can be made collectively. It's a very individual process.
Did I ever say that?
Yes, you did.
He's taking it back now.
No, I'm not exactly taking it back.
But that's what you said once. And from the kind of discussion that was happening, what Maya seems to be desiring is that all three are there, the director, the actor, the playwright in the same space, and something comes out of that collective, the ensemble. Now, do you think that could be you know. So.
If I have said that, well, maybe I was there at that point of my life, but now I think I have moved away from that position. I would very much like to be with my actor, although I do not want that entity called director around. Because I write something, and this is very serious writing, and now I have learned that I have to put total trust in my actor. I have to put total responsibility on him, and then he begins to decipher what I have written. And it is a journey done together. The actor and I can do it together, and I do not want the director to come and meddle into this business. But where is such an actor? I mean, I would like to do an actor exits, I would like to, because that is not a complete text. I would say that if some actor is prepared to work with me, maybe we'll edit parts of it, we'll add something to it, we'll create many spaces in it, and the final product would be quite a departure from the text you have read. But this is something I would very much like to do. But I don't see any director around telling us what my actor should do. The actor should talk directly to me. Why should he talk to the director?
So you don't believe in this, somebody needs a total image of the whole thing that's happening?
When there are too many characters, maybe, I would call him an organizer,
Him or her?
Her.
I may be the director.
Call him what you may, but he will still be there.
There are arrangers. Music में जब music composer एक रहता है, arranger अलग रहते हैं.
Could I be director and then we get some other actors?
Yes.
Yes.
I have an observation. It's not a question. You talked about the frame within which you would like to keep spaces. I mean, as a playwright, and then further you would like to give a lot of freedom to the actor to fill in spaces and so on. Traditionally in architecture, you would find that while making a temple or even making a mosque, the Shilpi would actually just design the form, but leave a lot of open spaces for others to fill in. Then will come the Raj, who will fit in some little bit more detail in it, but again leave it for the person who will fill the gap at the next level. Finally, it will come to the Shilpi, finally it will come to the craftsman, who will be told that, okay, fine, you have to make this pillar with, some kind of ornamentation or whatever. But it is you who decide what exactly you are going to do. So in other words, it was a very similar kind of thing as I can see in the process that you are talking. That's all.
So very nice analogy.
Yeah, I have a question. Which you like most? You started 86, 87 as a teacher, having that, Helmer Nora sequences, and then the 90s, 90 के दशक में, especially in the TI company, you started with the Kitab or Pistol, and then the other play was based on the Igloo, and then this Delhi Sadnat. You were basically planning for the play based on Nelson Mandela. Then you dropped that idea, and at present as a performer. So out of that scenario.
What's the question, sir?
Between teacher and...
As a Kathakali dancer, as a teacher, as a director, or as a performer.
Actually, I just want a long break. I don't want to do anything. No, but I think right now at this point, actually, I would like to be where Suvarna is. He's a drama teacher. He works with school children. Right now at this point, that's what I'd like to do, Suvarna, is to go into a classroom with a bit of Indian history, like we used to do in TIE company, go with a character and get the students to participate in history making in the classroom, is what I would like to do right now.
Thank you.
मित्रों, हर शाम का कोई ना कुछ तो अंत होना चाहिए, हर बातचीत का भी. Quite contrary to our expectation, that the two will not be so talkative as they eventually turn out to be. And it has been a very engaging conversation for all of us, also revealing in many ways of their own journeys and their own struggles and their own visions. And we thank them very much for this evening. And we thank on behalf of Nemi and Natarang Pratishthan all of you who have been here, witness to audiences voluntary audiences, I hope, and none too outraged audiences for this wonderful conversation that we had. Thank you very much.